Hi everyone, I'm Pierre-Yves Charpentier. You can call me Pierre. I'll be the moderator for this session on ocean acidification resources, networks, and support in the Pacific. So I'm a project advisor at the Pacific Community Center for Ocean Science, or PIOAC. And PIOAC is a center of expertise which aims to help Pacific Island governments and community to easily access the ocean science and expertise they need to make informed decisions. So you'll hear from three great speakers today, Kim Currie, Christina McGraw, and Katy Soapi. And the main focus of this session, it's a 1 hour session where you'll hear about various resources available for you on ocean acidification in the Pacific. And the key objectives are basically to engage with ocean acidification trainees and to share additional resources and opportunities of engagement, but also to create a community in the Pacific and globally to continue to engage on ocean acidification during this course and after the course. So that's really a start and kind of the beginning of a community, let's say, of practice as well. Without further ado, I will pass on the floor to Katy Soapi, who is the coordinator for PIOAC and the lead for the Pacific Island Ocean Acidification Center. So she will be presenting what is the Pacific Island Ocean Acidification Center and talk a little bit on the Pacific ECOP network. Over to you, Katy.
Thank you so much, Pierre-Yves, for the kind introduction. So as Pierre-Yves has said, I'm Katy Soapi, coordinator here at Pacific Community Center for Ocean Science, PIOAC, Bula, and warm greetings to you all. My talk will be on 3 parts. So the first, I'll just give a very brief overview of SPC, PIOAC, and the decade of ocean science under which some of these initiatives are happening. And then I'll go on and talk about the Pacific Island Ocean Acidification Center. And then I'll end with the early career oceans professionals initiative that we are also setting up. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering why SPC is leading some of these initiatives, including the Pacific Islands Ocean Acidification Center. Just to give you a brief overview, SPC has got 27 member countries and territories. 22 of those are actually Pacific Island countries and territories. And the main aim of SPC is that it's the, it provides the science, technology, and innovation for sustainable development in the region. And SPC has got a number of ocean science sectors. And so PIOAC, or the Pacific Community Center for Ocean Science, was set up to bring together the science within SPC to ensure that we can easily provide the ocean science and expertise that our member countries need so they can make informed decisions about the ocean resources and sustainably protect and manage them. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is kind of how PIOAC works. So within SPC, we work with the fisheries division. They also deal with the maritime ecosystems services work. We also have the GEM division, which is geoscience, energy, and maritime division. We also have the climate change division. And so SPC, PIOAC works closely with them to produce data, products, and the expertise, and then kind of using that to assist the member countries. So we have 3 levels of engagement. One is with member countries, one is with our regional partners, and also the other is on the international level with our international partners. Next slide. And so for those of you that have not really heard about the Decade of Ocean Science, I just wanted to put that here so that, you know, to show the link of how PIOAC is leading the Decade of Ocean Science in the Pacific region. So the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which starts from 2021 to 2030, is this global framework to support efforts to reverse the cycle of decline in ocean health and create improved conditions for sustainable development. We all know how, you know, there's a real decline in ocean health. And so this was set up to you know, really help stop this decline. The mission is transformative ocean science solutions for sustainable developing, connecting people and oceans. And if you look at its vision, it's the science we need for the ocean we want. And so this really aligns well with the work that PIOAC does in the region, which is to bring together the ocean science, assist our communities with their science needs and expertise, and help them with informed decisions. So that's the link. And based on that, PIOAC and SPC are the mandated regional bodies to lead on the decade in the Pacific region. Next slide, please. And so earlier last year, for the first call of action, we had a SPC and a number of crop organizations got together, and they submitted this program called the Integrated Ocean Management, or Pacific Solutions for Healthy Blue Pacific Continent. And this program has got three main pillars. First is on law and policy, which something we will not really discuss, but it's to ensure that we have robust legal instrument and policy for ocean governance. The second is on science, basically ensuring that we have science that can be used for decision making. So improving decision support systems, making access to science data and information to our communities and countries in the region. And the third pillar or theme we have is culture. In the Pacific, you know, many of our communities, they still pretty much use traditional knowledge and their culture in terms of how they govern and use their ocean resources. So all of the activities under this integrated ocean management should also include culture and traditional knowledge component. Next slide, please. And so under that science component, when this earlier last year, there was a call for proposal for an institution to host a regional hub, regional center on ocean acidification. So we thought, oh yeah, I mean, this is a science component that also fits in well with what we do at SPC. But the thing really is, we don't really have all the expertise that are needed to set up such a center. And so we decided to reach out to USP with the academic institution, labs, and the chemists. They could, you know, contribute to hosting this center. We also reached out to NIWA, the National Institute of Water and Atmosphere in New Zealand, which Kim is our focal point, and the University of Otago, where Christina is our focal point. And the thinking is that with all of the different expertise that we have within these four institutions, we can successfully manage and run this regional center with, of course, the help of our our donors, Ocean Foundation and NOAA, who have kindly put forward this idea to have this regional center in the region. And so that's basically the center. We have 4 hosting institutions coming together with different strengths with the support of our donors. Next slide, please. And so the role of this center, the following activities and very useful information for everybody, I'm sure, is to, first of all, host training courses to develop and support regional expertise in ocean acidification. So the first course that we are going through at the moment, this is the first course that's being provided under the center. And we hope to offer more courses. Definitely there's going to be another course. You will hear more about it. There's which will be more face-to-face, hands-on capacity development for people who want to actually run regional monitoring programs in their countries. And so the course that the center hosts, the first course at the moment, we will have ongoing training capacity needs that we want to continue to support, including data collection for those who are running monitoring program. There will be opportunity as part of the course to apply for a monitoring kit, as you will hear more about that in this course. The center will also house, distribute, and maintain research equipment, including spare parts for training of trainers and researchers, and for the training courses as well. One of the things we experienced through some of the previous monitoring that has been ongoing was, it's very hard to bring spare parts from outside the region. If something breaks down, it really slows down everything, the monitoring program, or it just stops it altogether when something breaks down. So the center hopes to be able to supply all this equipment that's needed if something breaks down, and being able to supply it and provide it quickly, rather than everyone going off to do their own procurement and all. Ensuring as well that we have data that can be shared widely, because ocean acidification is a SDG 14.3. Its countries have to submit their data for to share the information needed for decision making. So it's not data we can collect and just keep for ourselves. You can also publish your data and all of that, but one aim of it is to ensure that people know the science information that you collect. And that's where this center comes in as well, to help people actually upload and submit the ocean acidification data on behalf of the country. Resource mobilization is a key activity, and this support, the center is going to be supported by our partners and 3 part-time staff members who will be there to, support all the regional monitoring program that come under the center. So we will have those people and staff members who will be dedicated towards looking after this in the center. Okay, next slide. How much time do I have? Looks like I'm
a big 5 minutes left.
Okay, next. Okay, so the second, well, this is the last thing I want to talk about, is the Early Career Ocean Professionals Program. So under the Decade of Ocean Science, there is this global program called Early Career Ocean Professionals, and it's really there to elevate and strengthen the diverse perspective of our young generation of ocean professionals, and making their voices heard, ensuring that the knowledge is transferred from those experienced and senior scientists to our young scientists. And so it's more about sustainability and all that. So this global eco program has started, and it's ongoing now. And when we looked at it, we thought, this is a great opportunity for us here in the Pacific to tap into all this, the resources, the training opportunities that could come through this program. And so we decided to start our own Pacific Currie Oceans professionals program. Next slide. And so, and this contributes to capacity building in the region, particularly science capacity. The key aims or roles or what we want to achieve with this program is to develop and share knowledge and skills among ECOP peers and their seniors, again, that intergenerational learning, to also provide a platform for networking, resource sharing, and also promote new opportunities. So any courses or training, conferences, would like to be able to share them widely to the network, to contribute to the design of ocean solutions and actions in the implementation of the decade of ocean science in the Blue Pacific. What that basically means is, you know, we'd like to work with Pacific Islanders, young professionals, on how they see, what they think are the solutions for science problems that we can, you know, implement. And so they can be part of the network, they can be part of our leadership team within the ECOP network, and they can suggest, you know, how best this whole ECOP network can be shaped under the decade. And the last point there is to, you know, this is a space for empowerment and building capacity of Pacific Islanders. And, you know, in 10 years' time, hopefully they will be the leaders, you know, in ocean science, or just ocean leaders in whatever capacity they are working in. Next slide, please. And so in terms of what we want to do next is on ECOPs, we'd like to have a network of ECOPs across the region. We'd like to have you know, focal points in country, maybe in some of the ministries, and we are looking at that. We're developing you know, terms of reference on that. And we are also hoping to provide opportunities or competitions for development, capacity development. We'd like to have internship programs within, you know, the ECOP network. The other thing we'd like to do is, if you want to take part, if you want to be part of this network, please take the survey. We'll share the link to the survey that you can take part in, so that you can be part of the list of ECOPs, and we can share the opportunities with you. And we'd really like to hear more from you as well on how you think, you know, we can shape this ECOP program. And so we have a survey that you can do, or you can just write to us and say you want to be part of the ECOP network, and then, you know, we'll add you. But there's more happening in this space in the coming, hopefully next, you know, this year. We have a few plans already on making a regional dialogue and sharing more opportunities. And one of them also is training courses, which is kind of what you are doing at the moment, one of the courses. I'll stop there. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to you know, share some of these initiatives.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katy. Really informative presentation on this specific ECOP network, Pacific Island OS Center, SPC and PCOS. All participants, you might have questions for Dr. Katy based on her presentation or anything she talked about, but I'd like you to either note down your question on a piece of paper, or using the chat here. We'll get back to it straight after 3 presentations. We'll have time for questions, comments, and interactions with the three speakers. We'll move on to Dr. Kim Currie, who is a marine carbonate chemist working for NIWA in Dunedin, New Zealand. She works with community sampling partners as part of the New Zealand Ocean Acidification Observing Network, and has used this experience to develop resources for scientists who are starting their own ocean acidification programs. So she'll be touching on different networks, including the GOA Pacific Islands and Territories Ocean Acidification Network and peer-to-peer network initiative. Dr. Currie, over to you.
Is that working? Can you see my screen? Great. Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou ia Aotearoa, ngā mihi mahana ki ngā kaitiaki o te moana nui a Kiwa. Ko Kim Currie tōku ingoa, I mahi ana aho a niwa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So hey everyone, it's really nice to be part of this group and having the ability to interact with the up-and-coming ocean acidification researchers and future colleagues of mine from across the Pacific. So I'd like to follow on from what Katy has presented to give you an introduction to some of the resources that you'll be able to use in your ocean as you develop your ocean acidification expertise and practical work within the Pacific. So these are global resources, but with a focus on the Pacific that you hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of. So the first one that I'd like to talk about is the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, which is a collaborative and interactive network of ocean acidification scientists globally, primarily with who are involved in observations, not exclusively, but it's mainly around ocean acidification observing. This is a screenshot of the homepage of the web page of GOA. This is the address here. You'll get the we'll provide a resource with these links later. This resource is full of this is full of really useful resources. It's updated frequently and is very active. So I really encourage you to seek out this website and to familiarize yourself with it. One of the key things is this data portal, which gives a link to people who are doing ocean acidification monitoring around the world, including in the Pacific, and it gives information about the particular sites and access to the data. And so that can be a useful resource for you to see where other people in the Pacific are getting information, but also when you start doing your monitoring, you'll be able to put your monitoring sites onto this website and so provide information about your sites and your data to the rest of the world. You can see this menu down the side here. Oops, I'm having trouble here. Just one thing I'd like to highlight, if you go into regional hubs here and follow through, you'll get to this page, which is the regional hub page for us in the Pacific, PIOAC, the Pacific Islands and Territories Regional Hub. If you encourage you to join this, it's got the button here that you would click on to join, and then you can select the PIOAC hub to join up with us and be part of GOA in general and PIOAC specifically. Also further down on this page, which I'm not showing, there's information about the steering group who are helping to organise PIOAC. So both Katy and I are on that steering group. And the PIOAC is, we're really kind of getting underway at the moment, and we will be hosting a series of seminars. There will be OA Week, and it's an opportunity to collaborate and communicate within our Pacific Island OA community. So I encourage you to join up to the GOA and PIOAC, and then really keep an eye out for information on how you can further participate and contribute. Further down that menu, there's another link here to peer-to-peer. So peer-to-peer is the GOA mentoring program. That's where early career scientists such as yourselves are matched with senior researchers who are in a similar field. So you may be observationalists, you may be working on, I don't know, eDNA, you might be working on coral reefs, on mangroves, whatever it is that wherever you're working, you're matched with a more experienced researcher to help you to progress the work that you're doing. So you can join here from this website, either as a mentor. Some of you may have expertise that you are able to share with your colleagues, and or as a mentee, if you want to get some assistance from a senior researcher in a similar area working as you. This peer-to-peer program also has a newsletter called the Peer Review, which has a lot of information about our resources, upcoming events, and it highlights different peer-to-peer partnerships with ideas of how to interact. There's also some opportunities for scholarships which can enhance your mentoring. So this might be around travel, maybe publication costs. There's different ways that the scholarship can be used. So once you join up for that, then those opportunities will become available to you. Another page that's accessible from that Goa On main page is this Ocean Decade program. So the Goa On Ocean Decade program is called OARS, Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability. So that's an ocean acidification global program under the UN Decade. So Katy has already talked to you a bit about the specific Pacific Decade program. This is an ocean acidification program, and it has 7 main sort of pillars. So the first one is around providing worldwide, so global coverage of OA data of known quantity. There's a pillar around communicating that science to ensure the efficient implementation of actions. One around co-designing and implementing new observation strategies. One around increasing understanding of biological impacts. This one here is around developing society relevant predictions and projections. One around increasing ocean literacy within the public, and one around enacting all of that information into legislation to assist with mitigation and management practices. So the OARS program is getting underway as we speak. It's being set up, and so basically it's watch this space as the OARS program gets underway, and then see how you can contribute and how you can benefit from interacting with the OA, with OARS. Switching gear a little, this is another resource that's really useful for ocean acidification researchers, but not just researchers, not just scientists, educators, government employees, aquaculture people, all sorts of people are involved in this ocean acidification information exchange. So here's the web address here. This is a screenshot of the front program. Front page. So this is basically an international online community for everyone with an interest in ocean acidification, and it's a community forum board, really. You can sign up by going to the website and requesting access. There's various teams and groups that you can join or follow. So some of them are topic based, such as in this first column here, and you can see that there's many different aspects of ocean acidification where people are communicating and interacting, asking questions, advertising their events, advertising papers, whatever communication. And there's some region-based teams. You can see here that there's a Pacific Island one. Here is a screenshot of that. Currently, that OA group has 42 members, but this group is not particularly active. So I think that there's an opportunity to reinvigorate that group. So if anyone out there is interested in being involved in this, there's an opportunity there to contribute. I've chosen just a couple of threads to sort of illustrate to you how it can be used. So I did a search. This one here on the left is for Goer On in a Box. So that's that equipment kit that is available for setting up a monitoring program. And then this is some of the discussion that's come up in that thread. So a discussion here around suggestions for starting up a lower cost lab, 18 people contributing to that. Here's one here on what sort of sample bottles are useful to use. Discussion from around the world on that. This one over here on the right, I typed in ISAMI, which is one of the instruments, the sensors that are used to deploy to measure pH in the water. And these are some of the responses that we got there. So some of them are very specific. This person's asking about the batteries that for use in the ISAMI. This person here has had a problem around starting the ISAMI. And again, we've got links to the starting up of the lab and the sample bottles. So this is a really useful resource to look back through previous posts, but also to start a conversation if you've got a particular question that you want to get some feedback on. The Ocean Acidification International Coordination Centre is a centre that's hosted physically, it's in Monaco, and it's part of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and it has a couple, this is the website for that, and there's a couple of key resources that are of use to us as ocean acidification scientists. So the first is a news feed. So you can sign up on that website to a news feed. So the folks at the OAICC trawl every day through ocean acidification related publications, press releases, whatever, and then send them to your inbox, basically to your email inbox. So I'm on this, a member of this, and I get maybe 5 or 6 per day, and it's a really good way of keeping up with what's going on in the literature really around ocean acidification. So that's a really handy resource. There's a bibliographic database. So that there's a list of more than 9,000 journal papers which are on ocean acidification. Again, that's searchable. Some of them have links to the actual papers. Some of them are more like the abstracts. So this one here, I know you can't read my screen, but I did a search on Pacific. So ocean acidification papers with a Pacific focus. And there's all sorts of things come up there. There's species response, there's biogeochemistry, there's isotope work, all sorts of things. So a searchable database. The next one is a biological response database. So this is one where researchers can get biological experimental data. So, and it's searchable via region, via species, via experimental type, via ecosystem. The search engine is very easy to use. You're basically clicking on coloured bars, and that includes more than 1,300 data sets, and it brings up the actual experimental data. So that's a really good way if you're starting some experimental work, or if you want to know what's done in the area, you can do a look at what work has already been done, which can help to inform your own experiments. And I also encourage you, when you get to the stage of doing your own experiments, if that's your area of research, to contribute your own data to this database. So there, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So they're the resources that I want to highlight. And so look forward to you using these resources, but also contributing to them. So that's me, Pierre. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. It's been really informative, and thanks for these super useful and impressive resources that you just shared with us. Again, if you have specific questions on Kim's presentation, please type them down in the chat, we'll go back to it later, or just write them down on a piece of paper. The last presentation would be from a speaker you might already know, Christina McGraw, who did the first module of this OTGA ocean acidification course. So Christina is building scientific instruments to study OA at the University of Otago in New Zealand, and is the chair of the New Zealand Ocean Acidification Community Council, and is also an enthusiast peer-to-peer mentor. So over to you, Christina.
Great, thank you, Pierre-Yves. Kia ora koutou. Just really want to echo a lot of things that Katie and Kim have been saying already, and that it really is an exciting time to join this broader ocean acidification community. From a scientific standpoint, this research has been going on for a couple of decades now, but at the same time, governments seem ready for action. So it's actually a really exciting time because there are a lot of new opportunities. And so having a lot of new people that can kind of step forward and participate is really fantastic for everyone. So it's great to see so many people who are interested in the topic. Now, I'm ending today with just 3 additional resources. Something about the New Zealand ocean acidification community, a recent Commonwealth Ocean Acidification Handbook, and some resources you may find handy through the International Ocean Acidification Alliance. So we'll start with the New Zealand Ocean Acidification Community, or the NZOAC. So it started off as a handful of researchers at the University of Otago about 20 years ago almost now, but has grown to include about 250 members. This is everything from researchers to policymakers to iwi or indigenous representatives and marine farmers and government scientists. Now, as a group, we work quite closely together, including meeting formally once a year, but our main communication method is our monthly newsletter, which was launched in 2015. And this is the resource I want to introduce today. And that is because, like Marmite and Toast, there is a new partnership between NZOAC and PIOAC that is proving to be greater than the sum of its parts. So this year, NZOAC and PIOAC decided to partner to produce a joint newsletter. So using the structure of the established NZOAC newsletter, we're now working with SPC to provide information relevant to the wider Pacific community. Now I've got a list right here in this big blue circle about all of the different types of things that are included in this monthly newsletter, but just to kind of highlight them, they're just things like regional ocean acidification news. There are resources that might include new handbooks that have come out or new outreach materials. For ECOPS, there's a section on early career ocean professional opportunities, but also just general international opportunities that might be membership on working groups or residency programs. Now, if you'd like to sign up for this newsletter, you can register using the link on the top right here, or send me an email and I can add you. Now, if you want to take that a step further and actually become more engaged, we are looking to expand our newsletter team. So if you're keen to participate and you can spare maybe 30 minutes a month, please get in touch because we'd love to have you. The second resource is the Commonwealth Ocean Acidification Action Group product, which is the Policymakers Handbook for Addressing the Impacts of Ocean Acidification. Now, this handbook was released last year, and it's the result of 2 years of in-person meetings, virtual coffees, and email discussions amongst Commonwealth Blue Charter Ocean Acidification Action Group members. So the Commonwealth Blue Charter is just Commonwealth nations have gotten together to form 10 action groups to address specific issues involving the ocean. Now, New Zealand is leading the Ocean Acidification Action Group. But about 2 years ago, they had this workshop in New Zealand, and I've kind of highlighted the countries who came here. 17 Commonwealth countries came. And if you look at the ones that are highlighted there, you'll see that over half of them are from Pacific Island countries. And what happened after this is that there were a whole lot of discussions where all of the participants were thinking about what they needed to do to address ocean acidification. And there was this general consensus that although there are a lot of ocean acidification resources out there, most of them require implementation capacity or a level of expertise that either isn't accessible to policymakers or not available in all Commonwealth countries. So there was this request for a new resource that kind of pulled everything together, but contextualized it. And in particular, although you'll guess from the title that was written in consultation with policymakers and for policymakers, it pulls together such general resources that it can be really useful for anyone interested in ocean acidification. And it was also very specifically designed with small island developing states in mind. So the handbook itself is quite long. I just want to highlight 3 different parts that might be useful to you, especially when it comes to things like communicating ocean acidification. So the general goal of the handbook is to help the user develop a framework to develop some kind of path towards action so that that region can address ocean acidification. And it gives a step-by-step guide to help the reader do that. However, this is really often happening more at the policymaker level, but there's a lot of useful background information. And of the 3 components, one is this idea of grouping things together as marine assets. Now, I kind of touched on that on the talk on Friday, but we really used it here in the handbook. And I guess I say we because there are 4 authors, and Kim and myself were 2 of them. But we use marine assets because what it does, it allows us to talk about these really important assets to Pacific Islands, but also kind of their economic value, but also their environmental value. And then as a group, we can start thinking about things like what's the predicted impact. So by grouping everything together like that, we can start talking about them in terms of shared features, values, and mitigation strategies. So when you're trying to communicate and maybe push for some action, it can kind of be a pathway to start that dialogue. It also covers intervention options. And I did mention these also on Friday, but if you actually look in handbook, you'll find more information about each of them, but importantly, links where you can actually learn more about each one. Because remember, this handbook is really just about contextualizing information that's already out there. There are also a lot of case studies that you might find interesting. They're almost all from Commonwealth countries. And of the 7 case studies, 2 of them are for the Pacific Islands. One of them is one you already should know about from Friday's talk, and that's this development of a regional ocean acidification vulnerability assessment for the Pacific Islands. But also SPREP had a project a few years ago. I've got a picture of it right here. The development of local language posters to communicate ocean acidification. There are also other case studies you might find interesting. So there's one about the restoration of seagrasses to reduce local acidification, and about a public-private partnership for regional monitoring. And I know a lot of you are interested in monitoring, so that might be something you would like to learn more about. There's also a whole section on monitoring. And that is because although every different region is going to address ocean acidification using regionally relevant techniques, one thing they'll all have in common is the monitoring. And so the handbook breaks it down into 3 parts: the need for baseline measurements, so you understand current conditions, the need for continuous support, so you can do ongoing monitoring, but also taking it that step further and thinking about modeling and forecasting. But since we know that modeling can be challenging for a lot of people who haven't done it before, the handbook summarizes 3 modeling approaches and includes links to freely available ocean acidification data sets if your local data isn't sufficient or not available yet. Now, finally, the last kind of part of this that you might find relevant to you is that there's a whole section on raising awareness and engaging stakeholders. And that's because whether or not you're trying to increase the understanding of ocean acidification or trying to develop approaches to address it, you really need to engage the public and build partnerships to do this effectively. So to help with this, the handbook includes a lot of different sections on things like ocean acidification and facts and talking points. So you can actually kind of take those with you and you have some good solid information about ocean acidification that you can talk about. It breaks down target audience for engagement and different ways you might communicate to each of those groups. Now, the very last resource is actually an organization. So it is the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification, known shorthand as the OA Alliance. It has over 120 members who are all trying to tackle ocean acidification to protect coastal communities and livelihoods. If we look just at the Pacific regions, the governments of the Cook Islands, Fiji, New Zealand, Tokelau are all members. If we look at organizations, we have SPREP, SBC, NZOAC, University of Otago, they're all members too. So even though these are different membership levels, they're all working towards the same goal, protecting coastal communities. Now, your organization might not want to join, but that doesn't stop you from taking advantage of all of the great resources they have. So I've circled here this tab under the resources kit and just highlight 2 of them. The first is that they have a publications section, and the publication you might be most interested in is one that they organized in collaboration with SPREP in 2019, and it's all about mainstreaming ocean acidification into national policies. The other part of their website you might find useful are their webinar page. Now, especially with COVID, online ocean acidification webinars are really common. And this is something you'll discover if you sign up for the NZOEC newsletter, because we always throw a few of them in there. However, the OA Alliance ones really tend to stand out, and that's because they're not necessarily fully science focused. It's an incorporation of science speakers, but also government and community speakers, and how they're all working together to actually lead to action on ocean acidification. So by going to their website, you can actually view some of their past seminars. Now, before I hand it over to Pierre, I'm just going to leave this slide up for a few minutes. Everyone's talked now about all of these different ways that you can learn more about ocean acidification, but we do want to encourage you to take that next step and become engaged with the community further. So I've just highlighted some of them here, but the other thing we're going to do is tomorrow you get an email from Caitlin, and that's going to have a 2-page document in it that has links to all of the resources that we've talked about today and a few more. With that, I'll hand back to you, Pierre.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christina. Really helpful. I'll hand over to the whole group of participants. So we have about 26 attendees here. So now's your time. So we have about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes for questions. We know that you just received a tsunami of information with all these resources, links, organization, networks, and so on. But it was also one of the main goals of the session, just to share resources and opportunities of engagement in the Pacific. So please go on. I think you can unmute yourself and ask a question to the group or a specific speaker, or you could type your question in the chat and we'll take it as well. So the floor is yours. Okay, Caitlin wants to add. Please go ahead, Caitlin.
Thank you. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your reasoning for getting involved in all these great networks in OA, right? You've done excellent work to raise the issue of oceanification, engage with policymakers, and bring learning to groups such as this. And so I'm curious to hear more about why you feel it's important to take on this extra layer of engagement in the OA community, not just put your head down into your research and carry on that way.
So I think it's a question for the 3 of you. Anyone wants to go first? One at a time, please. Katie, please go ahead.
I can start. Yeah, so I started getting involved with ocean acidification not so long ago, not 10, 20 years like Christina and Kim. My background is in chemistry, so before coming to SPC last year, I was teaching at the University of the South Pacific, but I was more teaching kind of on marine natural products and so, you know, more organic related chemistry. But the opportunity to participate in a course came up on ocean acidification in 2017 at the university, where quite a big group from the Pacific joined. So we had a number of participants from across the region came. We all had the training, and and I continued on enjoying the in-depth hands-on course. And then we had some equipment given to us, so we started some of the monitoring. And the more I got myself involved, the more I, you know, learned as well. I didn't join in with any real, you know, like, I think a lot of times we are scared to join something because we say, oh yeah, I don't really know much about this area. But you'll never progress on that area if you don't get yourself involved. So we did all the monitoring with very little practical knowledge of what that whole ocean acidification data means to us. And so we started collecting the data. We reached out to, so I started taking part in this peer-to-peer mentoring as well. And that really helped. We had a peer, I had a peer mentor who was based in the US. She was helping me every day. I reached out to her and she would help. And so through that, I started really having a bit more confidence in ocean acidification monitoring, participated in, meetings overseas as well. And so that interest kind of started, more and more as I got myself to learn more about the area. And sometimes when we don't have regional governments fully supporting, or sometimes you question yourself, oh, but who actually knows about? I think the region is really picking up on ocean acidification, and as the scientists who can actually lead the work, I think we have this opportunity to really get involved. Now that I'm at SPC, I almost feel like it's my role to progress this, although it's not the only thing I try to do, but I feel that sense of it's a science field. I am doing the ocean, coordinating ocean science, and this is an area that, the Pacific lack capacity. How best can I contribute to it? How best can I, with the little knowledge I know, I can reach out to all the other international experts who can come and help train our Pacific Islanders. So I feel like I'm not an expert, but I have this, like if I can help progress this issue in the region, at least I've done my little bit towards, trying to build them some science capacity in the region. Okay, I stopped there, but that's kind of like how I got involved and how I'm still trying to get involved in this space here. And I am no expert in ocean acidification, just wanted to make that clear.
Thanks, Katie, for this this personal and experience, and it's quite inspiring, I guess, for a lot of the participants. We have another question from the group. Priyashna Kumar likes to know, where is the Center of Ocean Acidification based in Fiji, and how can we get involved? So that will be a question to Katie, I guess. You're still on mute, Katie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So the center currently is hosted by, as I've said, the four institutions: technical expertise from NIWA and Otago. USP hosts the training courses when we are able to open again. So they will host that face-to-face. They will provide the laboratories. They will keep some of the equipment will be there, and USPC as well. So the physical location will be Fiji, but it's basically shared between SPC and USP, where some of the equipment will be with SPC, and some of them will be also. So we're working together and working closely to see like which equipment will be at SPC. Is it only the spare parts, or will it be the sensors and things like that? So those discussions are ongoing, but it's currently hosted, especially SPC and USP at lower campus will be kind of like the main center at Institute of Applied Sciences, but working very closely with the School of Chemistry. It's got a new name now, but the chemistry division will host some of the work together with the Institute of Applied Sciences. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. What approach would be more effective in understanding the science of OA in the Pacific? Anyone wants to go on this one? So the approach to, more effective approach to understand the science of OA in the Pacific.
I would say, and I'll just kind of kick it off, and then I'd be keen to hear from Kim, who knows more about monitoring. But from my perspective, we know a lot about what the changes to the chemistry are going to be. What we don't know in particular, a lot of regions right now, are what the current conditions are. So if we can determine locally what the current conditions are, what the natural variability is, that's going to help us into the future. But then beyond that, starting to study organisms or ecosystems that are really important to you. So sometimes you see things that are maybe hot topics in the literature, they might not actually be so relevant for your region. So really take a step back and think, if your actual goal, it doesn't need to be, but if it is to try and encourage action, you probably want to think about regions, ecosystems, and organisms that are really important to your region. And so go there.
Yeah, I'm happy to expand a little bit more on that. So some of the impacts, as Christina has said, we already know. We know that ocean acidification is happening, and it's been measured in places in the Pacific already with long-term time series, like around Hawaii and also in New Zealand. So that's in open ocean places. Around coastlines and in specific countries, we're not so sure because there's not much monitoring has gone on yet. So that's where we're hoping that with this program and with the centre that people can start to do the measurements and then start to do the biological impacts. But we know already that if you've got a coral reef, it's going to be vulnerable. If you've got a mangrove, it's important to keep it healthy as it is likely to provide some mitigation opportunities. So there's already some science that we can apply down to local areas, but there's a big need for our local people to be doing science, ocean acidification science, right from monitoring to species response to ecosystem response in all the different environments. And this is where we hope that you will be getting involved. And then I think it's really important for us just to communicate, keep in touch, pool our data, pool our information, and then collectively we can drive the science forward. And then use the science as the basis for management and mitigation and policy action.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. We have a couple of more questions, including one from Sophia, who raised her hand. Sophia, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Oh, the hand went down, so maybe it wasn't a question. Just feel free to type the question in the chat or raise your hand again if so. Another question from Deepti to either Dr. Katy or Dr. McGraw. Some of us may not be from a scientific or research background, but from the community development sector. So I'm just wondering, how can we still be able to contribute and fit in? Apologies for the long questions. I think it's also relates to Tui's question about joining mentoring groups in Fiji or in the Pacific. Does it require qualifications? What are the ways that the locals can be included in monitoring programs? Dr. Katy or Dr. Christina?
I can try, and then maybe Christina can add a bit more. You know, I mean, if we think about, you know, the kind of impacts that ocean acidification can have on the development sector, particularly, say, the blue economy, where our livelihood is going to be heavily impacted by ocean acidification when it starts. I mean, it's already starting, but we absolutely don't know anything about it because we just don't have the data to kind of say, okay, ocean acidification is starting or is there already, or it's, you know, it's impacting the the coastal ecosystem and the marine assets that Christina had talked about. So particularly from a development sector and an economic sector, this will have huge impacts. And so advocating for ocean acidification, advocating for the science that's needed to make those decisions around coastal, the management of those resources is an area that is really important. The other issue, and one of the things we are currently facing, and from an academic perspective, and I used to have this issue as well, and I still do, how do we convince our governments that it's say, for example, it's also in the Fiji National Ocean Policy, so it's identified as a priority. But ocean acidification is something you don't see, so it's hard for people to kind of also imagine. It's not a visual thing a lot of times. So engaging, like especially school children and doing small, experiments that show the impacts of ocean acidification, highlighting ocean acidification as an issue, say, in ocean events, is very important. And I think moving forward, this is an area we'll try to do a bit more awareness raising around ocean acidification, trying to really bring in, ocean acidification as a theme in maybe the school curriculum. I don't know. Those are discussions we are having, and those are ongoing, not only in this group, but regionally as well as at the global stage. Christina, you want to add on there?
I'll add just a little bit because I think you pretty much covered it all. I guess I want to echo one thing you said, is that there are a lot of great resources if you would like to get involved in schools and give demonstrations on ocean acidification, because there are some really compelling hands-on experiments that can get students educated about it, and then they can go home and educate the rest of their families. Beyond that, it was related to a question also, I guess, Pierre, you also tied the two in, just about how to get communities involved. So the things that I think about straight away, in New Zealand, for example, Kim leads the New Zealand Ocean Acidification Observing Network, so our monitoring network. And I believe she has more people who want to do monitoring and collect samples for her than she can actually handle, because so many people, because their culture, their livelihoods depends on the ocean, they do want to be able to do something and want to help out. So this is where really the capacity development comes in, and things like Go On and things like PIOAC or the New Center, where there would be more ways so that more people can maybe one day contribute samples and get the communities engaged in that way. The other thing to note is, taking it back a step further, is that while ocean acidification is something that we are all very interested in, we do need to remember that it's just one of many, many stressors going on right now. There's warming, there's overfishing, there's sedimentation, and sometimes our ecosystems can actually handle one of those or two of those or three of those. So when we're actually looking at addressing ocean acidification, it could be that actually in your area, sedimentation is actually having the biggest impact. And if you can address that, then the coral reefs are actually going to be able to better handle the stresses for ocean acidification. So we can also look at it as a much more of a big picture standpoint also. Oh, and one last one, but Katy has more experience with this one. I think, Katy, you've been working with community groups on, was it seagrass replanting a few years ago? So maybe not, you don't look convinced. Yes, you did. Okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of replanting work is actually community driven. And so supporting that and supporting it in areas where it's likely to succeed and help with the local buffering. Those are great community projects.
Yeah, I can just add a little bit on that in terms of the community work. I mean, I see a question in there somewhere relating to that. So maybe I can just, briefly comment on that. We had previously a project that incorporated ocean acidification monitoring with mangrove restoration in the western part of Fiji. And so the mangrove restoration was pretty much led by the community. We helped, we provided the fund, we took part. And as part of that, they provided us with kind of like boats. And I mean, of course, we put resources into that for us to do the collection. We showed them how to do the monitoring work. And the next phase was supposed to be where, you know, we wanted to involve, because we were going every month, and some month when it's too, you know, really bad weather and we couldn't travel to the western part, we it would have been much better for the community to collect the samples, and then we can go and collect the samples when it's fine. So those discussions were ongoing, and community science, citizen science is a big program within the ocean acidification community. You can easily train up the communities to collect the water samples for you, or keep an eye on, you know, the sensors that you have deployed in the area. So it's the buy-in that you have to work on, you know, and making sure that the community understands why you're doing what you're doing. And in our case, what we did was really, they wanted mangrove restoration in that area. And we thought, great, how about we also do some monitoring around that? And so it was, you know, both something they wanted, and we added more science into the project by doing the ocean acidification monitoring, and it was a win-win for both, you know, both teams.
Thank you both. It's really good to see a lot of questions popping in the chat, so it means that you have a lot of interest in what's been presented on OA, and of course you're part of this training course, so makes sense. So we'll take probably a few more. We're already over time, but let's go on for another, let's say 5 to 10 minutes to take a couple more questions. I hope you can stay with us a bit longer. Next question is from Wycliffe. If I go straight to the question, it's about communicating ocean acidification. So he's saying many of us are based in rural areas and have little technical knowledge about OA. Hence, I see that it is equally important that we make effort and devise methods on how we can effectively communicate the science to the general public, including those with non-science backgrounds. I know that Kim and Christina have a lot of experience on ocean literacy and so on. So will one of you want to reply to this question?
So Kim, were you saying you were replying? I thought that was a shake of a head. Okay. Pierre, I was answering an email and I was typing. It was really just about effective ways of communicating science.
For people with non-scientific backgrounds.
Well, this is what the field has the big advantage of, is probably the word ocean acidification. Right away, it's a word that kind of makes everyone's ears stand up. And so I find a good way to think about it is actually just thinking about the basics of acidity and basicity. So people are really familiar with it. You know, you can taste sour things, or you can taste something that sort of tastes soapy and basic. And we can even taste, if we drink fizzy water, that CO2 in the water, actually the reason it feels so refreshing on the tongue isn't because of the actual bubbles, it's because it's that CO2 forming a layer of acid on your tongue. And so for people who, you know, most people have had a bubbly drink in their life, so they know what it feels like to have that layer of acid. So if you can talk about it just in terms of CO2, it's just kind of being pushed down from the atmosphere, reacting with the water, it's forming that same acid that you're feeling every time you taste a drink of sparkling water. So you can just, there are a lot of resources out there, a lot of really great YouTube videos where like cartoons and things like that, where you can just see how people are communicating to children and things like that. And that's often a really good starting place for you. I don't know if that was quite answered it.
I just want to follow on with that. There was a couple of resources in Christina's talk that she highlighted. One was some posters that were made by SPREP for local Pacific communities in Pacific languages. So I know that that's a problem with some of the Pacific communities, is that they don't have the words in the language to describe ocean acidification and to describe some of those concepts. So I think that providing resources in the local language is an important thing, and that SPREP have at least made a start. And I think that I'm not actually even sure which languages were included in that resource pack, but I think that they can also provide a template where you could take those resources and translate them as required.
Can I add one thing, Pierre?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I just realized that I was really talking about general public, but if we're kind of now taking it back to action and things like that, we can look in Washington State, we can look here in New Zealand, and one of the industries that is really effective forming a partnership with our aquaculture industry, because they can see firsthand, because of what happened in Washington State, what happens when the pH suddenly gets very low. There was an issue with upwelling too, but it's that same chemical process. So engaging with your affected industries early on, just bringing them into the conversation, letting them know about monitoring projected impacts, because then there's a bigger community and you all have this really shared interest to move forward.
Thank you. Good examples and ideas here. Okay, so we have Sophia's question in the chat now. I think it's super interesting, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say on that. How effective is data modeling in predicting future ocean acidification?
I think it's tricky, but it's also simple in some ways. So the way that we've been approaching this in New Zealand is that we can take like global projections and global models and then downscale them a little bit to our New Zealand situation. But in order to do that, we need some basic and local information to start with. So the forecasting and the global models are actually, they're really good for open ocean, but bringing it into the coasts, that's a little more tricky. But if you've got a little bit of local information, once you start your monitoring program, then you can use that to kind of downscale or to ground truth a little bit to your local conditions. So that's what we did. We took some modeling results from the big global models, and we took some local measurements that were done around the coast of New Zealand, and we just kind of downscaled them and moved them in to fit our measurements. So that required access to the models, and the resource that Christina talked about, the OA handbook, has a section on how you do that, how you can access some model outputs if you don't have access to the models yourself. So the OA handbook has that information. And then you need some starting information in your own area. So as soon as you start doing some monitoring of your own, then you've got the ability to do that. And that is a good way, I think, to project, to forecast and project what's going to happen in your own neighborhood.
Thanks, Dr. Kim. We have two questions about the fisheries. So one from Vanina, sorry. Working from the fisheries sector, I'm really concerned on the impacts of OA have on the marine assets, as Dr. McGraw have mentioned. What are some solutions the network agencies are doing? Thank you. And I think there was another one, similar question on assets. How can we contribute effectively in policy making in the Pacific? So maybe it's two different questions, but one on what are the agency doing and what can we do on the advocacy side, the policy making side?
I'll start with the fisheries one, but that's mostly because I don't know of any country really doing anything about ocean acidification from a fisheries standpoint. They're doing it from aquaculture, but not fin fishery. But I might be wrong on that. So Caitlin, Katie, Kim, do you know of any examples? Beyond investing some money into research, I don't know that any planning is around ocean acidification. And Caitlin, you know?
Nope, not much that I've heard of. So that's a great area to look into more. Maybe
I think one of the consequences for fin fisheries, especially the sort of open ocean, is just shifting where there's food quality and food quantity is a big effect on the fin fish, as well as affecting them physiologically themselves. But many of the fish will move their physically move, their geographical distribution will change. The smaller, more inshore local fish, like the coral reef fishery or that kind of thing. So that really depends on the quality of the ecosystem, or how healthy the ecosystem is. So that's got to do with the habitat, with the food that these fish are eating, and the quality of the food that they're feeding on. There's been bits and pieces of research, but a lot of that is quite specific to specific species and specific areas. But in general, mitigation and management strategies, if a healthy and resilient ocean, if we can actually decrease emissions is one of the big things, you know. If we're wanting, the whole idea of doing this kind of work is to not just measure, but to take action. And the action, the primary bit of action that we can take is decrease the emissions that we're making, and to help the environments, the local ecosystems be healthy as possible so that they're more resilient. So that may mean, you know, decreasing overfishing, decreasing spot pollution, maintaining the health of the mangroves, whatever it is, and that will then feed up through the ecosystem and help the fisheries in the long term.
Katie, do you want to add? Or no? Okay.
Sorry, I don't have a lot of information on the fisheries part, but and I know there's been a research that's going on impacts related to, you know, fish eyesight, for example, that is impacted by ocean acidification and all that. So other than that, you know, I mean, this is an area that, you know, would be really good to have an expert working with us as well, because fisheries is such a big area for the region. So if, and this is all part of the whole regional center that we want to be able to bring in experts who are working within the specific fields and areas regarding ocean acidification that we can reach out to when we have questions. And the great thing is that, you know, ocean acidification has this global network of experts as well that we can reach out to, and the resources that you've seen as well. And, you know, we're here to, as part of the hub, the center, to shape the program as we see fit and necessary and applicable to the region. Fisheries is a big issue for us. Our livelihood is a big issue for us. So these are the things, you know, moving forward, we'd like to look into the experts dealing within these specific themes relating to ocean acidification.
Thanks for this. I think we have about 1 or 2 remaining questions in the chat, so maybe we can go through them quickly for the next 2-3 minutes. One is about from Sasa, sorry if my pronunciation is wrong, but about the link between climate change and OA. Would an understanding of climate science in the Pacific context be a big influence to issues of ocean acidification in the Pacific? So how we approach addressing ocean acidification impacts given the pressing issues of climate change?
Maybe I can just start. Well, I mean, ocean acidification is not a separate issue. It's you know, climate change associated impacts, and those include ocean acidification, rising temperatures and sea level rise. All of these issues are connected, you know, due to climate change. And as I've said, ocean acidification is not a separate issue from so it's this, you know, combined impact of all these different stressors that Kim has already mentioned. They're the ones we want to, you know, like we're worried about. So ocean acidification is one issue. And if, I don't know if most of you know, but, you know, at COP26, there were a number of events that involve ocean acidification. In fact, Fiji was part of the Commonwealth side event, talked about, you know, ocean acidification in the region as part of this whole climate change discussion. And they talked about the center that we are forming. Even IOC also had a side event where PICOS also presented about the center that we are. So we are developing, we were forming, this was last year. So yeah, it all happened. Ocean acidification was one of those issues that was highlighted and had a number of side events that, you know, specifically addressed it. So to that question, yes, this is I don't know if I'm really answering the question, but this is an area that's well recognized already as part of climate change impacts. And there are countries that have it in their national ocean policy. If you look at the national policy of Fiji, for example, OA is a priority area. Other countries, Samoa, for example, has mentioned this as a priority, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu. So a number of countries have highlighted it as part of climate change impact, and yeah, recognizing it as one of the threats.
Thank you. I think the last two questions are for you, Dr. Katy. A quick one, can PICOS provide funding for OA-related outreach activities? And the last one would be about the community training. How much time does it take to train the community, and what age group will be most effective in terms of collecting samples?
So the first question on PICOS providing funding. We're looking for funds. At the moment, we can't say PICOS will provide it, but definitely the center through the monitoring equipment grant will be provided to those participants who qualify to get some of the equipment. So as part of the training, as I've mentioned, you will have the opportunity to apply for equipment and perhaps a stipend that goes with the equipment to actually do some monitoring work. And once you have the equipment, you can use it to go for outreach. You can show activities to school children, and you know the equipment is going to be at your disposal to use, and you know, as you see fit, how you want to collect data with it, and maybe you want to have some outreach activities with it, and school activities are always very interesting because, you know, you can easily do small experiments and just, you know, use some corals, and then put acidification, some flyers and all that. So there's material already and templates prepared by other groups as well that we can tap into as we go forward with the center. And this is an area that, you know, we like to see some progress in. But for PICOS to provide funds, I can't say we will, but definitely we're looking for funds. And if we we are able to get some funds that come through PICOS to support regional countries specifically on ocean acidification, then yes, we will reach out to countries. At the moment, we don't have those funds except through the center and the award that goes with the equipment, if that answers the question.
Yes, the first one.
Okay.
Then the second one was
the
about
second one.
training
Okay,
community
so,
members.
yeah,
So who, what age?
Yeah, so the second one is the work we did was up in Ra. This was a community that they wanted to do mangrove replanting after Cyclone Winston. And they had specifically worked with a previous project. They had planted some 500-600 mangroves and the funding ran out. And so when we went in, we were just able to say, okay, we can continue with the mangrove planting because they wanted to do that. And we say we want to do some monitoring with the mangrove planting because the understanding and the science that comes with that is, you know, seagrass restoration, mangrove restoration contributes to mitigation of ocean acidification. So that's kind of the project aim we went with. So we were able to do the monitoring and, you know, simultaneously also planting and helping them with the mangrove restoration work and doing the monitoring. They already had a phlegma representative in the community. So it was quite easy for us to work with the phlegma representative, and they have, you know, a lot of times we think we know how to do these things, but to be honest, the community where they were all experts in mangrove replanting, you know, than us. So we didn't really have to teach them anything. They did all that themselves, and we had to learn from them. And we had a person who was an agriculturalist in our team, so he was also able to you know, mark out how the mangroves should be planted. So he helped them, but you know, at the end of the day, the community already knew all these things. So it was a phlegma representative who was for the village itself. So he's the one we work closely with. And even when we were not there, he was going ahead and doing all the planting himself whenever he could. So it was an elder group of, you know, he was in his 30s and he's a representative of phlegma. So that worked in our favor in that he was already trained up. On the ocean acidification stuff, we were not really able to get the community to do the sampling for us because that was the next phase. But then COVID happened. And so all of 2020, we were just not able to do any sampling. And so that the 2020 where they were supposed to do the sampling, nobody was allowed to go to the community. And visits out into the community wasn't allowed. So we really didn't have the chance to train them, although they had seen and participated in the collection on all the other 1 year. We had 2 years of collection. So the first year they had seen and they learned, but the second year was when they were supposed to do the collection themselves, but that didn't happen. I stopped there.
Thank you, Katy. That's a great story, and thanks for highlighting the importance of local knowledge as well, how we can learn as well from community members like you did. We ran about half an hour over time right now, and I see that the number of participants remain quite consistent. So big thank you for staying online. So thank you all very much for taking the time to participate in this session, and we hope it's been useful. And we hope you'll continue the engagement through the various networking opportunities that's been shared with you today. So please subscribe to at least one of the networks or the website that's been shared with you today. A special thanks to the three speakers, Katy Soapi, Currie, and Christina McGraw. And we'd also like to underline the fruitful interactions we had with you. So many thanks for your good questions and contributions. So we wish you all a very good evening and hope we'll see you soon in Discourse and in the other networks that's been presented today. So Malo, thank you Tomas, Vinaka, thank you very much everyone. Merci and bonne soirée.
Thank you.